Hi, I'm Dan Wood.
I'm Ravi, Abbott.
And we're from the Retro Hour podcast, and you're watching Retro Unlived.
If you only knew the power of the dark side.
2, 1, 0.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Play Expo in Blackpool. My name is Dan Wood, and we are from the Retro Hour podcast. Now, our podcast comes out every Friday. If you're not familiar with it, we do news and kind of recap the top stories of the week, and then every week in our show we interview a veteran of the video games industry. And that is exactly what we're going to be doing on stage today. Now, we've got some huge names who are going to be joining us to tell their stories and, you know, relive those glory days of computing and video games. Just a quick show of hands. Did anybody here have a Commodore 64 back in the day? A few 64 fans? Any Amiga fans? I think we're in our element here, Ravi.
The right audience.
Now, we'd like to introduce our first guest, of course, former Ocean Software Director, Gary Bracey. Now, Gary is widely regarded as turning the fortunes of Ocean Software and landing some of those huge movie license games that we all remember. So please, ladies and gentlemen, give a warm welcome to Gary.
That's very warm, thank you very much.
Now, this is a question we always like to start with to give you a little bit of background. But what was your first ever computer experience then? Where did it all begin?
Well, it was in the days before computer porn, so my experience was a little bit disappointing.
Dark ages.
I guess the first real... I had an Acorn Atom with a floating point on, so I was very lucky. But my first real experience was the Spectrum, I guess. And I got the box where you can get the, what was it, teletext type thing? Prestel, was it? So that was online as well. And that sort of got me into it, and I thought, yeah, this is what I want to do.
Did you always kind of want to work with technology, or did you have other ambitions?
I had ambitions. I had no idea what I wanted to do. I worked in retail, I worked at Littlewoods chain stores, management, and getting into computer games sort of changed my life, and I thought, well, this could be an interesting direction career-wise. So I bought a Spectrum the day the Spectrum came out, and I rented some shelves in a local video library and bought a few games from a distributor and thought, I'll start a retail operation. And within a year, it did pretty well. Within a year, I'd made enough money to open up my own short store in a place called Allerton Road in Liverpool, which was the first computer shop in Liverpool. And that sort of got me on my way. The shop was called Blue Chip, very imaginative. And it was great, and I was dealing with people who were really into games. It was in the very, very early days. And then about 2 years into it, I wasn't really cut out to be a shopkeeper. And John Woods, who was a mate, and he relatively recently started a company called Spectrum Games, which had turned into Ocean Games, I think it was then, Ocean Games. And he asked me if I had any experience with games, and I said, yes, I sell them, I think I know what people like. And he asked me if I wanted to help him oversee the game production of the company, which was doing quite well at the time. They'd done a few successful games. So I had no grasp of programming. I can't draw, I'm not an artist, but I think I had a feel of what people liked to play because I sold to them every day. And that's what really kicked it off. So I joined Ocean, and I think I found my niche.
That was in 1985 when you joined Ocean.
Yeah, around about there.
And that must have been quite an interesting time because, you know, obviously before that we had the fall of Imagine Software as well. That obviously was like a huge story in the industry then. I mean, did that kind of affect Ocean? Obviously, a lot of their games kind of came out of that purchase, didn't it?
Yeah, well, they bought the brand. I mean, I knew all the Imagine boys. I used to, we socialised a lot because the hub of the UK games industry at the time was really Liverpool and Manchester. And in Liverpool, you had Bug Bite, you had Imagine, Software Projects, and Odin, which became Thor, which became Odin, and quite a few of them. So it was quite a big industry in the northwest there. So I knew quite a few people there. And when Imagine went, which was sad, Ocean acquired the brand and decided to publish their coin-op games, their coin-op conversions under the Imagine label.
Well, weren't you always been a kind of movie fan as well?
Big style. Yeah. In fact, I always thought if I hadn't have done this, if all opportunities had been open, I would have loved to have gone to film directing. That was my dream. But instead I guess I was directing games, which is close enough, I guess. But I love movies, and when I started getting into the Ocean licensing side, after the early successes of the few games, particularly Top Gun, the movie companies started to realise that this video game hoo-ha could actually be quite lucrative, because they started seeing royalty checks which they'd never seen before. They'd licensed the game for X $1,000s and wouldn't expect anything more from it. But all of a sudden, some of these games started to sell quite a few, and they started to get royalty checks in, and they started to take it really seriously. So, and at the time, I guess Ocean were the largest active company in movie licenses. So they started sending us scripts. And I think I was the only one who wanted to read the script. I devoured these things. I read all the scripts, and I actually still kept a few. They're all at home. And so I was looking at the scripts and sort of saying, yeah, there's potential there. No, that's not suitable. They actually sent us, I swear to God, they sent us Rain Man. Perfect fodder for a video game. Count how many matches on the floor. So that's what sort of sparked that off, and of course I got this sort of B-movie script which I read, and I thought it was pretty good, and I said to John David that we ought to take this one, and that was Robocop, and that was a big one, because no one really expected that to do as well as it did. It was a B-movie after all, or perceived to be a B-movie, and it just captured the culture at the time. And of course it was perfect fodder for a video game. The genre was perfect, the action element, and Paul Van Hoven, is that his name? I forgot now. He was a pretty good established director. So it was a bit of a punt, but it really changed the fortunes of Ocean in that it gave movie license games a lot more credibility, whereas before they were a little bit more, I guess, cookie cutter.
Well, when you first started at Ocean, I mean, was it kind of one of your priorities to exercise a bit more quality control?
I didn't start Ocean. I started that. There was no specific agenda. What had happened was, when I was brought in, Ocean had recently got the rights to Knight Rider and Street Hawk, and they were being developed by some freelance companies. One of them was in Brighton, I recall. And I went to visit them, and they'd just been taking the money and hadn't really been doing anything with the game. And we had a deadline, and the marketing was all set to launch the game in 3 months' time or whatever it was. And there was no one overseeing it, and so I felt that the only way really to address this was to have a little bit more control, so bring more people in-house, because when I joined, I think there were about 10, maybe 12 people in-house at Ocean. So the first thing I wanted to do was expand that into a proper studio. And bear in mind, this was not done in those days. These days, you've got studios of hundreds and hundreds of people, but in those days it didn't exist. It was the start of the industry, and no one knew what to do. So we started a recruitment campaign, and we started getting some amazing talent in, some of whom are here today, and bringing the real AAA titles in-house, which allowed us, I use the control in the nicest sense of the word, but control in that we knew where it was at the time, we knew whether it was slipping behind or going to be on time. If it wasn't looking good, we could tweak a few graphics, and it worked. Yeah.
What was the kind of culture like back then? Was it laid back? place or kind of suits and...
It was insane. I mean, I was about 30, 29, 30. Most of the developers were in their teens, in their late teens. And as I say, all incredibly talented and enthusiastic and passionate. And so, but no, most of them had come straight from school or college or whatever and hadn't had a real job before. So you had the suits upstairs who were doing the sales and the marketing, and then you had the t-shirts downstairs in the dungeons, as we called them, and they were developing the games. And I was sort of in the middle. I was the interface between the two. So the suits would scream at me if something was late or something wasn't quite right or wasn't getting a good review. And the t-shirts would scream at me because I was screaming at them saying it's late and hasn't got a good review. So I was completely unpopular. But it was a great job. And it was the culture, how can I describe it? It was just raw. It was a pioneering time where the video games industry was just starting to exist. There was no precedent. You couldn't look at another company and say, that's what we want to be like. There were no examples to follow. We made it up as we went along, I guess. And some of it we did well, some of it we didn't do so well, but I think we did more well than we did badly. And it was wonderful. The atmosphere was great because everyone loved what they were doing. And no one really considered it to be something that was going to become part of the global culture. In those days, it was a fad. It was going to last 5 years, and then people would move on from video games to something else. And no one believed that in 30 years' time we'd be coming to an event like this and seeing all that old stuff and so much affection being shown for it. I think that's taken us all by surprise, and if anyone says any different, I disagree. But no, we just didn't know. We were just doing something that we loved, and that showed, and it showed in the whole culture.
I mean, speaking about the culture at Ocean, I mean, did you kind of learn any lessons from Imagine Software? Because I know a lot of us probably saw that documentary that went out on TV, and there was lots of, extravagance, you could say, and like 18-year-olds driving like new Ferraris and that kind of thing. I mean, did you guys live it up quite a lot, or did you look at them and think, actually, we should rein it in a bit?
No, there was never that lack of control. I think Ocean was basically run by John Woods and David Ward, and they were businessmen. They actually just saw Ocean as a business. They weren't into games. I don't think they ever played a game in their lives. They saw it as a business opportunity, and so commercially they ran it as a company. Downstairs in the dungeons was a little bit different, a little less disciplined, but upstairs, as I say, you had the suit, you had professional salespeople, you had marketing teams, artwork, art teams, interfacing with the likes of Bob Wakeman, who's here today, to do the artwork, and created this great business. And I guess they actually created a template for the way business was run in the video games area. So it wasn't out of control, although I think David would have liked a Ferrari. Well, he had one actually. But, no, it was. I think everyone was doing pretty well. Everyone was pretty well paid because we wanted to keep the talent. So we needed to incentivise everyone. So everyone had a pretty good life.
What was your relationship with Commodore like, and how did you work with him?
It was very platonic. The relationship with Commodore, I mean, David Pleasance is here today, and I haven't seen him literally since those days, so it's going to be quite a reunion. We had a good relationship with Commodore. I was probably less involved because that was on the sales side. So obviously we were developing and creating and publishing some very, very popular games on a global scale. And Commodore were releasing new platforms, new hardware. So they wanted some way to push that hardware, and obviously a great way of doing that was bundling the machines with high-profile games. And of course, we did the Batman the Batman bundle for the Amiga, which was a phenomenal success. And part of that, I would like to think, was attributable to the game being pretty good.
Let's talk about licensing games, because I imagine it's quite an interesting process. Did you have much involvement with the movie studios? Did you kind of get scripts and ever visit the sets? And
all the time. I spent probably 2 weeks out of every 6 in Hollywood. Hey, had to buy sunglasses and everything. And that was an amazing experience. I was on the sets an awful lot, and I made friends with. I'll never forget. This sounds awful now, but one of the movie stars of the day was back then Alec Baldwin, who was married to Kim Basinger, and they were like the Brad and Angelina of the day. And he was doing The Shadow, being directed by Russell Mulcahy, who did Highlander. And we got the license for that. And I had quite a few meetings with them, and I got quite friendly with Alec Baldwin, of all people. And I remember inviting him to my house for dinner. I said, oh, you and Kim come round for dinner. And he, oh yeah, great. When we're in London next, we'll come over. He never did. We still got the plate out and the plate set. But yeah, it was great. We'd go to the premieres, the premiere parties of the movies. I mean, it really was. It was a wonderful experience, and probably the best experience of all. I'm name dropping because you asked the question, but it's a nice little anecdote. Is meeting with Steven Spielberg on Jurassic Park, and he wanted a creative meeting. So I went into his office in Amblin Studios, which was on the Universal lot. And we had a great, and he was a lovely guy. He was like a kid. He was like a big kid, full of enthusiasm. And can we do this and can we do that? But the thing that I remember most about his office was he had this cartoon. And the year that E.T. came out, Gandhi came out that same year. And he had this wonderful cartoon on the wall where there's a picture of Gandhi with a wheelbarrow full of Oscars. And next to him is a picture of E.T. with a wheelbarrow full of dollar bills. It's just that's the thing I remember most about my meeting with Steve Spielberg. So no, the movie licensing side was great. The scripts kept coming in, and we'd visit the studios, we'd speak with the directors, and sometimes they'd have ideas of what they wanted the game to be, which we never delivered. We did our own thing. Of course, the problem was, we got these things and the movie was coming out in 12 months or even 6 months in some cases. So we had to design and develop and get the game out in time for the movie release, which was quite challenging, even more challenging these days. But as I say, we had, I can't stress this enough, we had exceptional talent in our studio, and I've been asked about this a number of times, and people have asked me about particular people, and I hate mentioning names because I don't want to miss anyone out, but I was blessed with some incredible people, and they were great, and they delivered.
When you got a movie license, would there be a lot of competition from the internal staff to actually get a job working on that?
Yeah, I think so. It wasn't quite that easy because obviously everyone was working on a project, and then when they finished, they'd look at the next one. So it was a question of timing, really. It's all very well someone saying, I want to work on Jurassic Park, but if they're in the middle of the current project, then they wouldn't be able to, but maybe they'd be brought in afterwards to help the scheduling a little bit. But yeah, it wasn't entirely a democracy in that way, but obviously, from my perspective, if someone was genuinely interested in a property, then I think that would probably turn out to be a better game because they were passionate about it.
Were there ever any licenses you were offered that you turned down that went on to be like massive movies?
Mark Rain from Epic Games, he runs Epic Games. He keeps reminding me, and I swear to God I don't remember this, but he keeps reminding me that I turned down Wolfenstein. And he gloats about that all the time. I genuinely don't remember it. In terms of movies, no, there were some we lost which we wanted, like The Simpsons and The Turtles. The one movie license that sticks out in my mind that we shouldn't have got was Hudson Hawk, which was an absolute turkey. But if I tell you, that was the best script I'd ever read. And you had a great director. Shane Black was the writer. I forgot who the director was, but significant director. Bruce Willis was flavour of the month. Wonderful, wonderful script. It was funny, it was action-packed, it was great, and it was ideal for a video game. I thought, this is going to be huge. What had happened, apparently at the time, was Mr. Willis was such an ego that he'd come on set and he'd basically rewritten the script for that day. And so the script that we bought was very, very different to the script that ended up on screen, which is such a shame because it would have made a great movie, the original. So not a regret, but maybe a mistake.
There were such big kind of licensed games. Did you ever have any issues with submitting to them to the game company and them saying, oh...
Yeah, there was... Batman's ears were 1 pixel too long. I remember in John Rittman's Batman game, it was an isometric 3D game, and you popped along and you had to get your life recharged by taking pills. Batman does not take drugs, so we had to change that whole scenario. We were rushing to get The Simpsons. Acclaim got the license for The Simpsons. But we got the Spectrum and maybe C64 license, I think, for Europe. So we had to do certainly the Spectrum version, maybe the 64 as well. And we submitted the game, and we were doing it by the skin of our teeth. It had to be out for Christmas. In fact, I think it may have been part of the Commodore bundle at the time. So it really was a very, very strict deadline. And we got the thing back saying, everything is approved except Bart's blink is off-model. So, firstly, I didn't know what off-model meant, but it just meant it wasn't approved. Because The Simpsons, apparently, I learned this because of it, when you blink, your top eyelid goes down to the bottom, like most human beings. The Simpsons blink differently. They have a bottom and a top eyelid that meet in the middle. And our blinks were off-model because we did it as a human blink. It's probably that man over there, Mark Jones, he probably did. Blame him. That was a silly approval. But no, it was mostly likenesses that gave us problems with approvals.
Well, obviously you mentioned Batman, and I mean, in 1989 that got a massive reinvention with the Tim Burton movie. Before that, I mean, it was kind of remembered as a bit of a naff kind of 1960s show. Obviously, in that process of licensing the game, did you have any idea just how popular that was going to go on to be?
I don't think so. I think I would put it down to the whole point of Ocean, the philosophy of getting licenses, was not necessarily that we felt we had to make a game based on that property. It was a marketing thing. What we used to call the granny purchase, because Granny would go out at Christmas and want to buy her grandson a computer game. So she'd go to the shop and she'd see a vast array of cassettes or discs on the shelf and not have the faintest idea what to get him. But then she'd see Rambo and Top Gun and Batman, and she'd recognise those, so she'd buy them. So it was sounds very cynical, but it was purely a marketing exercise. So when we got Batman, it was a recognisable brand, but also I believe we all thought it would do incredibly well because the game was fantastic. John Rittman did an amazing game, and then when the movie came along, we knew that was going to be a big hit movie, and I think we did the movie justice with the game we made.
Did you ever kind of feel under pressure having to, put big financial commitments into these games and maybe have to change things?
I didn't put any financial commitment. Yes, there was significant pressure. I mean, when we got to Jurassic Park, I think that was the first $1 million license. And this was back in the days when $1 million was a lot of money. It was the first $1 million license, and back in the late 80s, maybe 1990, that was a punt, because there was never any guarantee that a movie was going to be successful. You had the credentials. You may have had Steven Spielberg directing what was the biggest book property of the decade, but there was no guarantee it was going to be a success. So you know, we ponied up $1 million and probably had to pay quite a large royalty as well, I don't remember. So there was a lot of pressure. And I remember wanting to do something groundbreaking for it. And the idea was to do a Doom-type game in 3D. But we just didn't have the time because, again, you know, we had a year or 6 months to do this game. And so you couldn't do anything too technologically advanced because it would take too long. So we had to make compromises, sadly.
You know, back in that kind of like 8-bit, 16-bit era, a lot of the games were platformers. Was it ever kind of a challenge to get the spirit of the original movie into a platformer?
Yeah, that was always, I mean, one way we addressed it, I think, was to do a number of mini games around the platformers. So, Batman the movie, for instance, the main substance of the game was a platform game, but then there'd be other intermediate levels that would give some variety and obviously lift it. And of course, the look of the game was very important, so we had to use reference from the movie to try and replicate the look and the feel of the movie within the game. We did the same with Robocop. We had some mini games in that, but platformers were tried and tested. Although personally, I believe the best platformer we made in-house was Adam's Family. I just thought it was remarkable.
Well, you're one of the few companies that released stuff for the Commodore C64C. Well, the 64C and the Amstrad GX4000 as well. Could you tell us more about those systems?
Absolutely not. I have no record. I'd love to. I honestly don't. I mean, I don't remember. There are some things I remember very, very well. I don't recall an awful lot of that. Was the C64C with the cartridge?
So
yeah, the console, yeah, the console.
No, I genuinely don't remember anything about that. I'm sorry.
Probably best forgotten, to be fair.
Probably, yes. No, I'm not being cagey. I'll happily answer everything honestly if I remember. I don't remember.
Well, speaking of The Simpsons as well, I mean, obviously, that was just shown on Sky at the time, wasn't it? And then Bart Simpson became like the biggest star in the world. And that again showed quite a lot of foresight on Ocean's behalf. I mean, did you kind of have people keeping an eye on what was going to be the next trend? Were you always looking ahead?
Well, it's funny you mention The Simpsons because I remember I was out in the States the week the first Simpsons show was shown. It had been originally a little bit on the Tracy Ullman show, and it was the first week that it had its own episode of its own series. And I came back and I said, we've got to get this license. This is going to be huge. The Americans are going mad about it. We ought to get the license. And no one had heard about it in the UK. So there wasn't the attention paid to it. And about a year later, when it started to become truly phenomenal, Acclaim had snapped it up already. So that's what we missed, actually.
I remember the first Simpsons at school. We had a VHS copy from America and a full assembly, and we all sat and watched it.
Comments like that made me feel so old.
Speaking of kind of other franchises, you worked on a game based on the Watchmen comics as well. How was that?
Yeah, I was into comics a lot, and the Watchmen had just started. In fact, it hadn't completed the series, and I loved it. So I got in touch. We were doing a little bit with DC because of the relationship with Batman, and I contacted DC. We went up to New York. Excuse me, and we were looking at a few licenses, including Lobo. And the Watchmen, I asked them if the Watchmen rights were available, and they said yes. So we negotiated those, and then I got in touch with Dave Gibbons, who was the artist on the Watchmen, which he co-created with Alan Moore, excuse me. And he came to the studios, and that was in the old ones in Central Street. And we gave him his first computer, an Amiga, and he was actually going to do the graphics for the game as well, or help with the graphics. Excuse me. But I don't know what happened to it. For some reason, I think maybe it didn't become mainstream enough. This was obviously before the movie, a long time before the movie. And perhaps it didn't become mainstream enough. And although we were a big company, we did have limited resources, and we had to cherry pick what we'd apply those resources to. And so I don't think we ever actually prototyped the game. I don't think so, I don't recall.
Well, speaking of comics, I mean, you mentioned you're a comic fan then. Was there any other like superheroes or comics that you would have liked to make a game of?
I did want to do Lobo. I
Okay.
really wanted to make an adult version of Lobo, but I was voted down on that. Although I think we did play around with the idea at Ocean US at one point. But no, it was always very difficult. And this was the thing about, you know, you obviously think the big one always was Superman. He was the biggest superhero. But when you think about it, how can you make a game to control someone with all those different powers? He's got X-ray vision, heat vision, he can fly, he's got super strength, all the rest of it. And your controls will be all over the place. It will be an incredibly complicated game to develop. So we didn't really consider that. I don't remember, I'm sure there were, I think Green Lantern was one we tried to do as well, but I don't remember any others, I'm afraid. Sorry.
So, why did you end up leaving Ocean in the end?
Pass. It was being bought by a French company, or there was rumours of it being bought by a French company, and I felt that the culture was going to change a little bit, and I wanted to move on. There was more to it.
For another day.
Yeah, another day.
What would
It's
you
not
say?
being recorded.
I'll ask you later. So what would you say is kind of Ocean's legacy then?
It's a great legacy. I mean, the number of people here are testament to that legacy. I think we were there at the beginning. We did a number of things right. I think it was one of the few companies in the business that was operated as a business. And that contributed greatly to its success. I'd like to think that we set out a template for the way game, and not just us, but a lot of companies in those days, we set out a template for the way games would be developed from there on. You know, there was no such thing as a producer when I started at Ocean. And then they started talking, that came from America, oh, you got a producer. And what the hell is a producer? We just got people looking after the games. That's what they had on their business card, person who looks after the games. So the titles became very Americanized, but the actual process, I think, is still largely kept to today. You know, you schedule things, you design them out, you develop them, really simplifying it. But you know, it's an inexact science, and this is the problem with a movie, with a book. You have a very, very finite template to follow. If you're making a movie, you can have a shooting schedule, and weather permitting, you can pretty much stick to it and edit it. You allow time for editing, and you'll end up with a pretty good experience, and you know time-wise what that's going to be. With a video game, it's really difficult to explain to people back then, because most people didn't play games. And the movie people, you had to explain to them, this was not a linear experience. You were creating this infinite form of entertainment which could branch off in any way, and everything had to be tested for usability, interface, look, feel, and you wanted people to get their £5 worth when they bought their cassette. So it was a really, really complicated process, and therefore you needed, the people developing the games had to be gamers. They had to understand what they were playing and whether they enjoyed the experience themselves. And that has obviously continued to today. And as I say, Ocean weren't the only ones doing that. There was, Mark Kells over there, System 3, and plenty of others, you know, making amazing games. And all of those companies, I'd like to think, back in those days, formed the template for the way things are done today.
Well, talking of today, are you still in the games industry?
Yes, for my sins. Yes, I started a company called Scary Puppies, and I'm just helping out, trying to find new studios who have great talent and a great idea, and helping them raise money and find publishers. And I'm doing a little bit in China as well. I love the business. It's been the most incredible business, and it's changed a lot, and it's very volatile, and it's very frustrating, but I can't think of anything better I'd like to do, and I do consider myself very lucky, really.
What is it that excites you so much and keeps you passionate about the games industry?
Because it's constantly changing, and it's the innovation, because the true innovation is coming from the younger generation. You'll find that, I'm being cynical now, sounding a bit like Simon Butler, that there's a lot of iteration in the AAA games. It's the very, very similar scenarios, because when you're looking at multi-million-dollar budgets, they've got to play it safe. So they don't want to take too much of a risk on massive innovation. With exceptions, there are exceptions, but by and large, games are changing very, very little, but the real changes are coming from the indies, are coming from the small bedroom programmers, reverted back to the 80s in that regard, who've got no overheads, and all they want to do is make great games. And there are some truly remarkable ideas coming from them.
Well, thank you so much, Gary. We're going to do a Q&A with the
Yeah.
audience.
I thought this was a Q&A.
I'm sure we have lots of Ocean fans in the audience here. Anyone like to ask a question? Raise your hand.
As a kid growing up, I loved The Simpsons and I loved wrestling, and I was always wanting those arcade games to come out on their whatever platform, C64, Amiga, but I was gutted when they didn't. I was just wondering, was there any problem with them licenses, or were they ever offered to Ocean, or were they just unobtainable?
No, it was funny with coin-ops, the rights were different. The coin-op companies would license the coin-op rights, and we'd license the video game rights. Sometimes, as in the case of Robocop, we'd get everything. We'd have the coin-op, the computer game, and actually the pinball. So we were in control of that, and so the game you saw on the computer was the same. Excuse me, it's the coin-op. But by and large, the company, I think it was Bally, who licensed The Simpsons on coin-op, they'd design it and develop it themselves. Did the coin-op game not get released at any point?
I think it got released on C64 in like Australia or somewhere like that.
Oh, really?
I don't know who did the convert. I can't remember who did the conversion,
No.
but it wasn't.
Well, it was Bally who would have licensed that out, sub-licensed it actually, but that would have been complicated because they wouldn't have had the video game rights, so it would have had to have been a collaboration. And the problem is, with something like a big license like The Simpsons, we would have to pay a fair chunk of royalty to Matt Groening or Fox for the license. If you're also going to use the game from Bally as well, you'd have to pay them an additional royalty on top, and then it may not become commercially viable.
Right.
Yeah.
Anybody else got a question?
Yeah, the game assets, like sound and graphics and music, were there any examples where you might have outsourced that? Was it all done in-house? Did you do everything within Ocean?
We tried to do, as I say, the really, really top games, the high-profile games, we tended to keep in-house. Our musicians, we had an amazing music department, and the likes of John Dunn and Barry Leach and Martin Galway and all the rest of them. And again, I don't like mentioning game names because they always leave out. So they were remarkable, and obviously they could do more than one game at a time. Yeah, we generally tried to keep it as much in-house as possible. And in fact, I think we probably, because we did outsource some games, we didn't do everything in-house. And of course, there were a lot of original games from the likes of John Rittman, Sensible Software, DID, and they'd have their own resources. But sometimes our own musicians would write the music and audio for external games. I don't know whether they did John Rittman's, they may have done John Rittman's. And Martin Galway did Sensible Software's elements, I think.
Mr. Driscoll had a question?
Oh, I didn't. So how, when you went from sort of 16-bit to 32 at the tail end of Ocean, can you sort of elaborate on that a little bit further? Just because I imagine it was quite difficult, the changing industry.
There were two marked changes. One was going from 8-bit to 16-bit, obviously, and having to develop games that would fit into 16K of memory to games that would fit into a massive, I can't remember, 1 megabyte or whatever it was, 512. But then the change from 16-bit to 32-bit wasn't so remarkable as the change from computer to console, because of course the Sega and the Nintendo started to gain a lot of ground, and the culture of developing console games was very, very different indeed. So that was probably a bigger change, and it took a while to adapt, but we did it.
Anybody else?
You're right. You mentioned before when you've got people down the dungeon having moaning at you and things like that. Can you remember what your relationship was though with, for different magazines, in regards to reviewing games? Did you have any run-ins or anything like that? Going back was a bit too harsh or anything?
Yeah, I mean, I had a great relationship with the magazines because of the nature of what I did. The sales and marketing people were extremely good at what they did, but again, they didn't play the games an awful lot. So when they wanted a game demoed, quite often I'd go and help them demo the game as well. And so I built up a great rapport with a lot of the old Crash guys, Gary Penn, who saw last week, and Julian Rignall and the rest of them. And we had a pretty good relationship. There was a little bit of aggravation because if we got a really low review score, that hurt, obviously, and it hurt, our guys, our developers took it very personally as well. They'd invested 6 months, 24 hours a day into putting this game together. It was more often than not a labour of love, and then for someone to say it's a load of shit and give it 20%, that's going to hurt. You've invested a part of your life into that, but that's the business. My whole thing was we spent a fortune on these magazines buying advertising. So we could, if 1 month we've got a £5,000 worth of advertising for a particular game in a magazine, and they've given it a 20% review score, it sort of offsets that investment we've made. So that was a little bit, I'm not saying they shouldn't give it a bad review score, but you can understand they're happy to take the money, but if they could tell us, well, look, we're going to give it a bad review score, there's not really much point in you advertising in this magazine, that's probably quite fair, but we never got that.
Did they give you any feedback? Sorry.
It was always too late. I mean, they'd always give us feedback, and they'd always tip us off or tip me off and say, it's not very good, or it's great, or whatever. And sometimes we'd be able to persuade them and sway them because they're a little on the fence about something. But bear in mind, when the review, when the magazine companies got the review copies, it was too late to change anything. We were going to be releasing it next week. So, whatever feedback they gave us, we couldn't really, it's not like today where you can change something on the fly. That was it was cast in stone.
Thank you.
People forget back then, pre-internet magazine reviews could make or break a game, didn't it?
Well, they did, yes. But
Sound like a robot, Dan.
Anybody else?
Someone get the door.
Did you have a lot of enjoyment when you were running your own computer store, and also did you have any young customers that come in that went on to be quite a talent in the industry?
Yeah, I loved it. I mean, it was great because when I wasn't busy, I could play computer games all day. It was fantastic. No, I really enjoyed it for the short amount of time I had it, but I wasn't really a shopkeeper, as I say. And it's great when I was busy, but of course you get periods when no one's in, and okay, I was playing games, but it wasn't. You felt as though you needed to be doing something else. But it was again, it was a bit of a first in Liverpool, and I still get Facebook messages from people who I haven't heard from for probably almost 40 years, maybe 35 years, saying, I used to come into your shop and you got me into games, and it's really, really gratifying. Like people here today, that there's enormous affection for those days, and we had no idea that would happen. We were just doing these things because we enjoyed them. We were doing them as much for ourselves as for you, and it's lovely to see so many people at an event like this paying homage to those days.
Any more questions for Gary? The front, Ravi? I shouldn't have that McDonald's breakfast early.
Gary, do you have any cool gaming or film memorabilia, like in your home or collection?
Do you know, I kept, and I don't know what happened to it, I must have lost it when I moved house, I kept a head over heels plushie, and it was these plushies that were made for a competition prize with Crash or something, and it was like a big head and a big heels with a bit of Velcro on the top and bottom so they'd stick together. And I had those and they were wonderful. I lost them. I've still got quite a few scripts, but the problem with Ocean, we never had a library, we never had a showcase, a museum section with a box of every single game. No one did that, and I know Mark over there has made it his life's quest to build up the full Ocean collection. But the company itself never kept archive copies of the games, which is sad. But sad I didn't know it.
Yes, sir.
Hi Gary, I was just wondering,
Hello.
how old was your youngest software engineer?
I would say there was a guy who was actually working at college called Nick Sheard. Mark, can you help me out with this? Nick Sheard.
Yeah.
He used to work with us in the school holidays, didn't he?
Yeah, what
and
did
he
he do?
was a genius.
PC games did he do?
PC games. And is that you?
No.
Oh, David. How old were you?
16.
Oh.
There you go. Okay, there was this guy called David Blake who was bloody useless.
Remember him well.
No, of course, and yourself, yeah. Oh, that was a very leading question. Sorry.
You fell into a trap there, Gary.
Yeah, I know. Okay, any more can be traps.
Any final questions for Gary?
Sorry, I'll shout it.
Oh, not you. She's a lawyer, watch what you say.
Did you ever get a bit part in a movie?
Yes. Got all these plants throughout the audience. This is leading questions. We did the movie of Nightbreed, and got very friendly with Clive Barker, who wrote the books and directed the film. And we were on set. I was on set an awful lot in Pinewood Studios, and one day he said, "Would you like to be in the film?" And I went, "Nah, of course." Like, yes. And I spent 4 hours in makeup being made up as a creature, which I've still got photos of. But 6 hours getting the prosthetics removed. So I did that for 2 days, but that was an amazing experience. Shame the game and the film was so crap. But thank you for reminding me, Sally. Thank you. Any more plants? Oh, God.
You mentioned that you read all the movie scripts, so I imagine when you were reading them you had an idea in your head of how the game would play or how it would turn out. How much say did you have on what the game played like, and was there any that were drastically different from how you imagined it when it was reading the script?
It's a good question. I think I took more of a high-level view and identified not so much the entire movie, but scenes that could be translated to a video game scenario. And then once I was satisfied, and Untouchables is a good example, once I was satisfied that there was enough meat in the movie to be able to create a game from, then no, I'd be in the design meetings, we'd brainstorm, but I might have contributed one or two bad ideas, but by and large, I let the creative people take charge of that process. But obviously I had input, and they were great meetings. Yeah.
Thank you. The first time I met you was I was 16. I used to work at a computer game shop, and you worked for Ocean. You took us out, as Ocean took us out. And I remember, I must have been drunk, 16, 17. No, it's not like that. I was young, naive, and needed the money. No, but I remember you spoke to me with massive respect. And the next time I bumped into you was in 1999 at Cannes at some computer game show. And once again, you treated me with respect, and I was just a lonely staff writer at the time. Where did this culture... I said to my wife genuinely, you had an impact on me about the way that I deal with people, is that I had nothing to offer you as a computer gamer back in the day, but yet you treated me with respect. And I swear prior to this, I said to the wife, I've seen you speaking here, that you had an impact on me, just the way that you deal with people. Where has that come from? Has that always been prevalent with you? I mean, just this culture of just Just treat people with respect. And true, it's not bullshit,
No,
this is absolutely true.
Well, thank you. I'll treat you like shit from now. I appreciate you saying that. I like to think I've gone through a life treating people as I'd like to be treated myself, and it's as simple as that, genuinely.
Amazing.
And that's the way it should be, I think.
Any more questions? Okay, well, I think that was a good point to leave it on, Gary. Thank you so much. We do have some more amazing interviews coming up this afternoon. David Pleasance, the former Managing Director of Commodore UK, is going to be joining us.